Hey guys, so let me show you something I've done for a friend of mine. He's not a Singaporean, so recently he came over to Singapore for work and he asked me whether or not he should rent or buy a house in Singapore. So I've taken a live example and I'm going to show to you guys how I actually think about and run through my thought process with you guys. Okay, so the property in question is about 3.5 million Singapore dollars. It's a pretty sizable property in Singapore here. You can see it's a four-bedder. Loan to value is about 75%. That's very standard for Singapore standards. Loan tenure here I've used 18 years. He's in his 40s, so loan tenure is not as high as someone like myself. In any way, uh, the rate of return here is like 5% per annum, and I'm using 5% as a simple rate of return because right now the US 10-year treasury is about 5%, so I think 5% seems like a reasonable rate of return. Okay, so the series of events that take place, because this is a purchase of resale condo, right? The typical process is like that. So we pay a 1% option fee on day one, and then the seller will issue us the option to purchase. This amount comes up to about 35,000, which you pay in cash. Blah blah blah, right? So essentially, assuming you exercise the option after 14 days, you have to pay a 4% excise fee, and then after that there are some other cash components as well. Stamp duty you can pay in cash, but you can actually reimburse it later using CPF OA. So these amounts come up to this. I've used a standard formula, so there's nothing very much to talk about. Pay 20% remaining. Yeah, this one is a combination of cash and CPF, if he has actually CPF, right? So essentially the total cash and CPF component comes up to about $1 million, right? And this is for a 3.5 million dollar property. So okay, so let me share with you the loan amortization schedule. So typically, the resale condo takes about 3 months for standard completion to happen. So if you buy in November, you typically only can complete the sale or collect your keys after 3 months. So following which your loan will get dispersed. Your monthly installment is about 15,000, of which about almost 6,000 goes to paying interest, and about 9.5k actually goes to paying down the loan principal. You can see here the loan is about 2.6 million, so after the first month you're left with this, right? Okay, so that is all very simple and easy to understand, but let me explain to you guys something that you might not have taken notice, right? So over here, because my friend is a foreigner and he doesn't have a home in Singapore, but obviously if he needs to work here, he needs to stay in a place, right? So either he can actually rent a house of similar size and attributes at about, let's say, $10,000 base case. And then what I want to find out is what is the opportunity cost, right? Because if you actually buy your property, you actually have to put up this amount, right? This $1 million. Whereas if you start renting, you actually only pay, basically it's like an operating expense, right? Basically you expense a monthly rental cost of about 10k. Okay, let's not go into the argument that initially you need to put up a deposit and all that, right? That's not very material, so I'm not gonna model it out here. I just want to give you a sense of the plain vanilla calculations here, right? So how did I arrive at this very ridiculous number here, this opportunity cost of about $280,000 on the first month, right? The reason is because we need to put this down payment, right? So obviously, putting up a down payment of $1 million means that you could have invested this $1 million in the markets and making a return that allow you to pay down all these rental costs, right? So let us take a look, right? If what is the opportunity cost if we actually buy a house instead of rent. So essentially, I just use the example of that 5%, right? I've used 5% per annum rate, and then on a monthly basis, that's about 0.42%. So my interest rate, my rate of return is compounded by 60 months, right? You can see to the power of n31, which is the months left. So obviously, this one is super costly because this is a huge upfront cost that you have to pay if you had bought your house, right? So what happens is that, okay, this whole amount here that you can see is basically it comes out about 1.3 million, right? But we need to deduct off these amounts here, right? Because we actually are going to we just want to find out what's the return, right? So essentially we need to deduct the E19, and after that we also need to minus off the rental cost, because that is our true kind of opportunity cost that we are giving up, because this cost has the rental cost is the minimum cost that we actually have to spend. So what are we giving up? We're giving up around $280,000 essentially as the opportunity cost at the start, right, of this month. So as we go down the calculation here, you can see that the opportunity cost starts to taper off. The reason being, obviously, how I actually calculate opportunity cost here is I looked at monthly installment minus off the rental cost, and how much I can actually invest in at 5%, and what is that difference, right? So I'm not going to go into the details of the formula, but essentially I want to show you that as we move along, the opportunity cost starts to reduce, which kind of makes sense, right? Because obviously, like closer and closer you are to the selling point, you essentially your opportunity cost will start to drop as well. Okay, so essentially what is the sum of all this? Let us have a look, right? Is around 300,000, right? So I've basically came up with a P&L, right? So let us go through some of the key assumptions here. So the property year-on-year growth, I use a 3% annual growth rate. So essentially you can see that if you compound $3.5 million for 5 years at 3%, you come up to around $4 million when you are about to sell, right? So this is a gross profit after taking out the purchase price and all the miscellaneous costs over here that you can see: stamp duties, lawyer fees, the total interest is actually a real cost, right? And then the basically your monthly mortgage consists of interest and principal component, right? But your principal component is calculated for by the opportunity cost, right? So the interest cost is a real cost. The opportunity cost is not really a real cost per se. It's not a cash flow cost. It's actually just a economic cost, because it's a cost of losing out on investment gains had you invested this amount at 5% for 3 years, right? Etc. Okay, so basically let's go through the other costs as well: the fire insurance, the maintenance fees, the agent fees when you sell is about 2%, lawyer fee is about 2K. This probably is about a lot higher now, maybe it's at 3K. Annual taxes about 3K. This may or may not be the right one, but I'm just using an example here. But you can see the cost is quite hefty, right? So even okay, so I've calculated net profit with and without opportunity cost, right? So if I use the without opportunity cost number, I am taking out this 300K. I'm only netting a $21,000 net profit here. Okay, as you can see, it's quite brutal. At a 3.5 million quantum, not so sure how far you can go up in terms of the capital gains. The break-even is inclusive of my opportunity cost as well. If you want to take out the opportunity cost, it's going to be about 4 million. So essentially it validates this net profit, right? Because at about 4 million, your profit is only 21,000. So ROI, pretty straightforward stuff, not going to go through. And I've plotted also a sensitivity table. So this tells me, if I've used the base case here at 3% growth property price, I actually net a negative 291,000 inclusive of opportunity cost. So if what I want to show is that how much off will I be better buying than renting, right? You can see over here, let's say if I am able to rent this property at 5.5K per month, and it's denoted in this spreadsheet here at 5.5K a month, I'm spending about $343,000 in total after 60 months, which is 5 years. what is that delta, right? The delta is about, I'm better off by 52,000 Sing dollars if I actually bought it. If I actually bought the property and the property grows at 3%, then I will be better off. But what if the property actually only grows at 2%? Then I'm in the gutter. All these rate sales here simply mean that I am in the gutter. So it's really up to you, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think nobody knows where property prices would go. So obviously, if it goes up, you stand to gain a lot, right? A lot more from buying rather than renting. But all of us do not know where property prices will go. So I think this is a judgment that you would have to come to yourself. But I do have something off my head that I can think of, right? So imagine buying a property in Singapore, if especially if you are a long-term Singaporean staying here and working here, it's kind of like a hedge against your livelihood, right? Because essentially, if property price starts to escalate higher than expected, if it increases irrationally upwards, right? What you are saying here is that if I delay my property purchase and I start to rent instead, I could be a lot worse off going forward, because for the same amount of unless my salary grows at a pace of property prices, and then because if property prices goes up, generally rents also do go up, which means that if you do not own a property, what will happen is that you would just have to work a lot more years to cover that shortfall. And instead of maybe today you can afford a $3.5 million property, in 5 years time you actually need to pay 4 million, right? And then as you age, your loan tenor goes down, so you can borrow less, and essentially you will always be renting, and you will not be able to get into the property game. And the property game is not about making money, it's about ensuring that you actually have at least one home for your stay. So okay, I think I have come to the end of the video. I think I will probably do another video to talk about some other things property related, but until then,